Tonight on The Big Story, another week in the Vice President's impeachment trial central to confidential funds. Questions remain on where the money really went and how accountability can fall through the cracks if left unchecked. Marcos officials say it again. Ronald De La Rosa is still on the run. One ally of the senator believes the arrest of Bato is impossible at the moment. The storm called Maymay is unleashing its wrath. It is forecast to make landfall in La Union or Ilocos, but its impact will be felt beyond areas up north. Hours after capturing her first ever DC Open trophy, the amazing Alex Ayala moves on to another match. Tickets sold out in just half an hour. Good evening, I'm Ces Orenia Drilon. We begin with day 13 of Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. Questions linger on how the VP spent her confidential funds and whether or not they were used for personal benefit. One witness also testified that the rules on such money are silent on the use of aliases. What this week's trial underscored, though, there's no escaping accounting when it comes to public funds. The big story tonight from Mobile Journal, Merimon Reyes.
Or a total for the Office of the Vice President and the DepEd, 4,492 documents contained in 15 boxes, Your Honor.
Hindi mo naman siguro kami tinatakot, Attorney Gapunan.
Ay, hindi po. Also, Your Honor, the reason I made manifestation of this is we will not present the 15 boxes.
Private Prosecutor Lorna Capunan made this clear before presenting their second witness for Article 1 of the Duterte impeachment case. After Roderick Wamil, there's Eileen May del Campo, also from COA's Intelligence and Confidential Funds Audit Office. She had examined audit observation memoranda on the Office of the Vice President in 2023, as well as the Department of Education during the first semester of 2025 and the third quarter of 2023. Before Del Campo could go further, a debate erupted between the defense and prosecution panels. Lawyers of Duterte opposed to stipulating more than 800 acknowledgement receipts submitted by the OVP to COA.
What is happening now could have been prevented had we done this exercise during the pretrial. When the clerk of court asked for stipulation on documents, these included stipulations on the acknowledgement receipts. That was the opportune time for the defense counsel to have examined page by page. We are tempted to make a counter manifestation, Your Honor. Because, Your Honor, these manifestations, Your Honor, are because of their own doing, Your Honor. But in any event,
I hope you won't give in to the temptation, Counsel.
I will not. I will not, Your Honor.
Eventually, the prosecution gave in to the use of the defense's documents moving forward. Later, a schedule will be set so the defense can compare documents in the prosecution's possession to be presided by the clerk of court. Meanwhile, Presiding Officer Chis Escudero noticed discrepancies in the notices of suspension and disallowance issued by COA, as presented by prosecution witness State Auditor Roderick Wamil.
It was a typo error po. 69,787,000 pesos.
Ang dami namang nagkamaling numero doon. From 59,787, ang tamang total is 69,837.
Other senator judges were allowed time to make interjections on the 13th day of the Duterte trial.
Naranasan niyo na po ba ito dati na gamot ang bayad para sa impormasyon?
Hindi pa po. First time po dun sa may OBP po, Your Honor.
Okay. Si Mary Grace Piatos ay nakatanggap ng 70,000 pesos worth ng gamot bilang pabuya. Ano po ba yung sakit niya?
Hindi ko po malalaman since wala naman po dun sa document po na sinamit.
Senator Judge Kiko Pangilinan, on the other hand, asked if COA just requires acknowledgement receipts and not official receipts. Wamil said ORs are used if the transactions are with suppliers, but if the recipients were individuals, then they require ARs. However, he noted It's the first time almost all submissions made by both offices were ARs. Another inquiry from the impeachment court. Is it normal for confidential fund reports to indicate only aliases like Mary Grace Piatos and Ann Dilim? Wamil said there's nothing in the joint circular about this. So how do state auditors validate?
Hindi po yan yung focus po ng audit namin.
So sa
This
inyo,
what,
sige, go ahead.
this what we do po is compliance audit. So ang naging focus po namin ay yung expenses po na based on the face of the acknowledgement receipts as well as yung date kung kailan binayad as well as yung amount po. Since
Agencies na enforcement agencies, ibang government agencies na gumagamit ng alias, pinapayagan ba o hindi?
Hindi naman po namin ma-determine based on the documents alone kung alias or not kasi wala naman po silang ina-attach na document na nagsasabing alias po yung nakalagay doon sa kanilang resibo.
After hearing all this, Senator Judge Ping Lacson suggested an update to COA's rules when it comes to auditing confidential funds. Before trial for this week ended, the presiding officer permitted the use of self-confessed hitman Arturo Las Cañas' confession as exhibit in Article 4 of the impeachment trial or grave threats. Recall that it was questioned due to lack of notarization. Escudero further clarified that marking the exhibit does not mean the impeachment court has already ruled on its authenticity, admissibility, or evidentiary weight. Kapatid Mobile journalist Mary Reyes, we are One News.
Now helping us unpack the information packets in Vice President Duterte's impeachment trial is attorney Ralph Sarmiento. He's former dean of the University of St. LaSalle College of Law. Welcome back to The Big Story, Dean.
Yes, thank you, Cess, for having me again.
How would you assess the interjections of the senator judges? What are your observations?
Well, actually, technically, as senator judges, this is not like an actual civil or criminal trial where there is more restraint on the part of the judge, in asking questions to the witnesses. But in this particular case, this is a constitutional process, and the senator judges are actually allowed to ask probing questions to the witnesses. So aggressive questioning on the witnesses is not actually a violation of any principle or rule. What is important only is that they maintain neutrality, not only neutrality, but of course an appearance of neutrality. So as long as they maintain that appearance, that they are not in any way acting as counsels or apparently acting as counsel for the prosecution or counsel for the defense, as long as their questions are fair and they're probing enough for the purpose of clarifying the evidence from the lips of the witnesses, I don't think there's any violation on the part of the senator judges.
Okay, and you cannot conclude that some are biased for the defense or for the prosecution?
There's a distinction between bias and the appearance of bias. So
Okay.
people may
What is the
think that,
distinction po? Tell us the distinction.
well, bias is a state of mind. Bias, is a question of fact. Ultimately, we will know that in their actual assessment of the evidence and the explanation behind their individual vote in this constitutional process once the trial is concluded. But the appearance of bias, that is what appears or what is observable on the part of the public. Then you have to, because as senator judges or as judges, the principle or the obligation is not only to be neutral or to be unbiased or impartial, but to appear to be so in the eyes of the public, because that's very important for the purpose of maintaining the integrity and credibility of the proceedings. Because if they would not appear impartial or neutral in these proceedings, then ultimately people will be losing their faith in the integrity of the entire process.
Okay. So I'd like to cite the interjection, for instance, of Senator Amy Marcos and Senator Robin Padilla. In the case of Senator Judge Amy Marcos, there seemed to be a back and forth between the two of them and the witness, and but you wouldn't characterize that, as you said, it's allowed because this is not a
Well,
normal.
ultimately, we have to draw the line between aggressive questioning, which is still allowed under the law or under the procedure, and when you cross the line and you're already, let's say, mocking the witness or mocking the evidence or painting the witness as, for example, or making conclusions as to let's say the integrity of the witness or the personality of the witness. So that's different.
Okay.
So I think ultimately people will know how to make that particular distinction.
Okay, I just like to focus on the question. In the case of Senator Judge Amy Marcos, the question was whether who is accountable. Is it the head of agency or those that were pays of the check or the disbursement officer? Under the law po, who is ultimately accountable?
Well, actually, the question of accountability, I would not preempt the defense or the prosecution on that, no, because that's actually the one of the most critical points in this issue, because ultimately, what is being established right now by the prosecution are irregularities in the disbursement and everything, but ultimately, you will have to establish attribution that these irregularities are ultimately attributable to the vice president, and then they will also have to establish that not only are they attributable, but they must also result in the culpability of the president, and that particular culpability results in an impeachable offense. So I would not preempt, because
Okay.
ultimately the defense will be. I think this will be the focus of the prosecution. This is the missing link actually in the prosecution's evidence so far, and we expect that they will be focusing on this in the next stages of the trial. But ultimately, I think the defense will also be focusing their narrative on destroying or in showing that there is actually not only lack of attribution but lack of culpability on the part of the vice president.
So kulang pa ang evidence na hinahayag ng prosecution. It's very complicated, ang daming detalye. Do you think it's resonating still to the public, the trial, I mean? What do you think?
Well, I think we're now into another stage of the trial, which has become more evidence-based, more document-based,
Right.
as compared to the first 2 weeks, which are more theatrical and dramatic. So it really depends on how it resonates with the public. But judging from the online discussions, whether the social media platforms are still active in discussing impeachment, whether the proceedings are still creating a lot of memes which are being shared and debated, commented upon on social media, I think it's still very active. Social media is still very active. Although, of course, social media alone is not the indicator of whether the trial is still resonating to the public. But ultimately, it's one of the gauges that we can use in determining whether it still resonates with the public.
And it should, actually, it should, because this is, we're talking about our funds.
Well, technically.
But of course,
Technically, it's peso count, of course, yeah.
right. Now, the refusal of the defense to stipulate the documents that actually ultimately came from them, what does that indicate to you? In the end, to add, the counsel for the prosecution panel, Lorna Capunan, said that she was willing to even use their documents. Ano pong
Well,
tingin
ultimately,
ninyo doon?
it's a matter of strategy. It really depends on the evaluation of the defense. Sometimes, you can go into stipulations in order to expedite proceedings, or you may refuse to stipulate and then give the prosecution the burden of building or establishing the infrastructure of their own theory of the case and their own evidence. and then ultimately hoping that somewhere along the line they will commit some, some mistake.
They will trip.
Yeah, probably. So probably that's so instead of agreeing and making the life of the prosecution easier, probably they want to, so ultimately this is your responsibility. Then it's up to you and how you establish your own case.
But it's a delay, and there are some of the there are schools of thought na strategy din ito ng defense para mawalan tayong lahat ng gana. Kasi can you imagine earlier
Well,
they were like sitting there waiting for the witness to pour over the documents.
Well, I think people are now experiencing parang trial fatigue, no? Which is normal, of course, in a long, drawn-out trial like this impeachment process. Ultimately, there will be trial fatigue not only on the part of the teams on the prosecution and the defense. It will ultimately be felt also by the senator judges and ultimately by the
Yes.
viewing public.
Hence,
Yeah,
the,
but that's normal. And, from time to time, there will be some interesting facts or interesting testimonies that would again trigger, the interest of the public and would again, resuscitate the case from boredom to something which is very amazing and interesting. Yeah.
now, the role of defense counsel attorney Poa, there were some questions raised by, or at least Raffy Tulfo, Senator Raffy Tulfo, about a possible
Opo.
conflict of interest, and the presiding officer ruled that he doesn't see any. What is your opinion?
Yeah, because conflict of interest, it's gauged based on whether the party has a conflict of interest. So there's a different conflict of interest rule with respect to the ethics of a lawyer. So that's different. But I think the ruling has focused on the fact that Attorney Poa was not a party in the litigation. He was just acting as a lawyer, and therefore. The ruling, the way I understand the ruling of Senator Escudero was that there's no conflict of interest because he was just a lawyer and not the party. In the case, he was not the respondent. But ultimately, I think the point here is that whether there is conflict of interest in his capacity as a legal counsel appearing as a counsel for the defense. But that will be another issue. Separate from the conflict of interest on the part of the Vice President.
As a lawyer po, they say that is a master class when you point to the opposing counsel as having been somehow involved or putting some question mark whether it's ethical or not, some kind of participation, some kind of ethical question, I should say. Is that correct?
Well, ultimately, the question of ethics will be the personal responsibility of the lawyer. So it will not be sufficient ground to bar him from participating in the proceedings or from representing the respondent, in this case, the Vice President, because ultimately, it is the choice of the Vice President on who will be representing him. But ultimately, if there really is a question of conflict of interest and a question of violation of the ethics of the profession as a lawyer, then Attorney Michael Poe will have to answer that separately before the Supreme Court and before the Committee on Bar Discipline. But as I mentioned, that will be a different issue.
What is your interpretation of that meeting where which he attended, where they asked that instead of an audit observation memo, an audit query instead should be made?
Well, ultimately, you would say that they were negotiating for for the procedure, but at least our core people stood by the rules. That there are certain procedures that must be made. There must be an audit, evaluation report. Then ultimately, either a notice of either suspension, notice of disallowance, and these are the procedures. And Well, ultimately, what's important is that they stood their ground on the what is required by auditing rules, and they did not give in to the request of the defense, the what was being requested and negotiated by Attorney Michael Poy in this case.
So how would
You know,
you...
but ultimately, the senator judges will have to decide whether that would have an impact on the defense when the defense will build its narrative ultimately.
Now, I failed to ask you about the questions of Senator Robin Padilla, which seemed off topic, or was he trying to allude to something? Hindi ko
Which
maintindihan.
one? Which one
Yung
in
question po
particular?
niya na nakapunta ka na ba sa mga bundok? Ah, ano po ang sa tingin yung gusto niyang ipahiwatig?
Well, I really don't know. I cannot really guess, no? So most probably, I'm not sure about his point in that particular line of questioning. It's probably, testing the experience of the witness, whether he has sufficient experience, to make certain conclusions that Senator Robin Padilla might be expecting or might want to establish, want to infer based on the testimony. So, mahirap intindihin minsan yun.
Now, si Auditor Wamil, how did you think he stood up to all these questions from the senators? He looks fairly young, even if he has had long experience already in the COA. Kamusta naman po siya?
Well, I think he was very
Natipag ba?
calm. Yeah, he was very calm. And, as a witness naman, if you will just be telling the truth, no, and, nothing but the truth, and you will just be testifying to what you know, and based on the authentic records at hand, or where he personally participated, like where he participated in the auditing process. So I don't think there is a reason for him to be nervous or to be inconsistent. So I think he was very consistent, very. I would say that he was genuinely truthful about his narrative. It was consistent. It was subjected to cross-examination. I think there were certain points that the the defense was able to extract from him. And I think they were also, a bit successful in narrowing the narrative that the prosecution was trying to build. For example, they were able to extract the admission that, there's nothing wrong with, or there's nothing illegal about spending all that money, that huge amount of money in that very short period of time. There's also no audit, for example, there is really no requirement on that real identities of persons must appear in the receipts. So the use of aliases, as admitted by the witness in this case, so it's neither prohibited, nor expressly allowed in the auditing rules. So so I think the
Nakapunto
defense,
sila po doon.
yeah,
Nakapunto
nakapunto
sila.
sila. Yeah. So they were able to narrow the narrative.
And both defense and prosecution, panghuli na pong tanong, ano po ang observation ninyo naman?
Well, I think okay naman, no? So the prosecution has been very methodical in building their narrative, the structure of their evidence. And then ultimately, yun na lang yung hinihintay ko on the missing gap or the nexus, the link between the documents and ultimately the attribution and the culpability. So that, and then whether these irregularities in the audit reports and everything, whether they would be found or viewed by 2/3 of the senators as an impeachable offense. So that's what we need to find out. So ultimately, because that's the decisive factor.
Right.
Well,
As
on
a-
the part of the defense, of course, they will be presenting their evidence in chief by their time. But at least right now, I think they're also doing their part in like building some doubts.
Some doubts,
In the
yes.
narrative, in the narrative that is being built by the prosecution.
Finally, I'd like to share, like, for instance, yung doubts about the force of government. Pagkalaban ka ng gobyerno, talagang nakikita na lahat ng paraan, like the observation memo came after a budget hearing in the House. So that to me is a doubt, right? Or am I wrong?
Well, in a way, may parang may political motivation
Maneuvering,
yun, no?
tama.
So they can cast doubt on that. Ultimately, that will be part of their yung the doubts that they need to build, no, in order to destroy the evidence of the prosecution in this part. So on the part of the prosecution, they just need to build a prima facie case. Then ultimately, the defense has to sow doubts into that narrative.
Pero yun ang realidad no? Ano po, na pagkalaban ka talagang the force of government will be on you. Well, we thank you for sharing your insights once again, Attorney Ralph Sarmiento, former Dean of the University of St. La Salle College of Law. In other news, officials of the Marcos administration once again dismissed reports on the arrest of Senator Ronald Bato de la Rosa. Bato was last seen at the Senate in May following a leadership coup, a chase at the upper chamber stairwell, a shooting incident, and a so-called escape in the wee hours of the morning. Social media was abuzz yesterday about De La Rosa's capture after his very own allies posted cryptic messages. In a now-deleted post, Attorney Jimmy Bondoc said bad news was coming, while former presidential spokesman Harry Roque lamented that someone had betrayed Bato. And there was this mysterious aircraft at the Mactan Cebu International Airport. De La Rosa is the subject of an ICC warrant for crimes against humanity over his role in the Duterte drug war. Interior Secretary John Vic Remulla says the senator was last seen in Mindanao.
We would like to confirm categorically that as of 6 p.m. last night, there's been no arrest for Senator Bato. Wala kaming secret operations na hindi malalaman ng mga tao. We were always transparent in what we do.
The National Bureau of Investigation has also denied making any arrest. NBI Director Melvin Matibag thinks those who circulated the rumor might be up to something.
We have to look into it, bakit sinasabing nahuli, pero wala talaga, no? Baka kailangan ng content.
Palace Press Officer Claire Castro lashes out at Bondoc and Roque for making claims without substance and context. She warns the public not to easily believe rumors. Castro suspects this is just a tactic to divert from Vice President Sara Duterte's impeachment trial. Bato's ally, former Chief Presidential Legal Counsel Salvador Panelo, also denies the senator's arrest. Asked what he thinks about Roque's post, Panelo had this to say.
Yung sinabi ni Atty. Harry Roque na may nabutas daw.
I don't know it. Anything coming from anybody I don't know is not believable. Wala, di ba sinabi ng PNP, saka ginugil ko sa ano, hindi naman totoo.
Thank you, Sec.
Hindi nila makukuha yun.
You are watching the big story on One News. Coming up, Vice President Sara Duterte pays a visit to her known political allies in jail. That's amid her very own impeachment trial she is yet to attend. Details after the break.
Let's use the defense documents, Your Honor. Then they will not say, we do not trust these documents because it is their own defense documents. Maybe that will solve the problem of this court. We will use your documents, counsel. Will you still question using your own documents? Will you still question the authenticity of your own documents?
Of course not, Your Honor.
Okay.
Of
Then
course not,
maybe
counsel.
that is
but
a possible solution, Your Honor. Let us use the defense documents instead of the prosecution documents. Para wag na tayong mag-compare. Thursday, Friday, manonood pa ako ng Odyssey.
Counsel to prosecutors, Attorney Lorna Capunan there, dropping another punchline at the impeachment court. The seasoned lawyer's statements have been a source of light moments in an otherwise heavy trial. For observers, though, Capunan's remarks are not merely for comic relief, but an actual effort to get through the public, who seem to be losing interest in the proceedings. There was tension earlier between Senator Judge Amy Marcos and prosecution witness and State Auditor Roderick Wamil. First, Marcos asked Wamil on who's accountable for the confidential funds of the Office of the Vice President and the Department of Education. The senator insisted it's not Sara Duterte.
That is not entirely correct po, Your Honor. Because under the joint circular, it shall be the responsibility of the head of the agency first to approve yung cash advance. Pangalawa, to oversee yung agency-wide utilization. Pangatlo, to ensure compliance with the joint circular. And also po, inattest din po ni OBP.
Hindi ba yung designated, yung SDO, si Fajarda lang at si Acosta, hindi si VP, hindi siya yung payee eh. Ang liwa-liwanag.
Pero ang sinabi niyo po kanina, yung accountable officer.
Kaya nga, so yung accountable officer, yung SDO.
Hindi lang po si SDO po yung accountable officer, Your Honor.
Ang sabi doon, head of agency or person designated. Oo, ang liwanag sa definition ng joint circular.
The COA joint circular in question states that in cases of funds misuse, the custodian of the said money, such as the special disbursing officer, is held into account. Senator Amy wanted a particular reply from the witness, which she did not get.
Oo, ang liwanag sa definition ng joint circular. Mag-yes or no ka lang, kanina ka pa inaaway mo ko lagi.
Sorry po, Your Honor. But hindi po ako pwedeng mag-answer categorically since yun nga po yung provision. Hindi po kasi doon na nalilimit lang yung term na accountable officer kasi may other provisions na applicable pa din po with respect to the term accountable officer.
Asan?
Kanina.
Interpretation na ninyo yun,
Hindi
pinapalawak
po.
ninyo, andun eh. Head of office,
Hindi
head
po
of agency, or designated.
Attorney Wamil, kindly avoid arguing with
I
Senator
apologize
Judge
for Your Honor.
Marcos.
The presidential sister then proceeded to ask Wamil what he thinks is wrong with the OVP and DepEd issuing acknowledgement receipts for their confidential expenses.
Sa mga AR ng OVP, meron bang sinabi na gawa-gawa lang, hindi tunay, peke?
Dahil hindi po yan yung focus ng audit namin, wala po kaming basis para magkaroon ng findings po.
So ang sagot, no. Walang sinasabi na fictitious yung AR. At doon sa AOM, pati sa suspension, gano'n na rin sa ND, sinabi ba ng COA na yung AR and documentary evidence of payments, yung DEP, peke, falsipikado, huwad?
Since hindi po yan yung focus ng audit po namin, wala po kaming findings about that, Your Honor.
And since we're talking about COA matters, let's have a real expert weigh in. We have with us Attorney Grace Pulido Tan, the first female chairperson of the Commission on Audit. She's also known for the audit of the PDAF scam or the pork barrel. A pleasure having you with us, Attorney Tan.
Thank you, Sass. It's a pleasure always. Magandang gabi po.
Magandang gabi and an honor, of course. Now, let's go back to your time. You left in 2015, but it must... can you recall for us how that joint circular was drafted and what were the motivations towards tightening, I suppose, the oversight over the spending of government funds?
Thank you, Sass. Yeah, the ICFAO, or the unit that audits confidential and intelligence funds, is actually a unit that is directly under the office of the chairperson, which at the time was me, no? So I got a real personal, up close and personal kind of familiarity with this particular work of the co-op. Kasi nga, ako yung talagang direct head niyan. And along the way, we discovered many gaps. Kasi for one thing, yung mga rules and regulations applicable were scattered all over. Wala siyang isang manual, or parang as and when there would be circulars that would be issued. Pangalawa, yung mga requirements hindi rin consistent, no? And, mahirap sundan. Parang it would depend on who is auditing it. There was, in other words, no coherent guideline. And so at the time, napag-usapan namin ni Sec Butch Abad, Secmar Rojas, who was then who was the head of the ILG, Vod Gasmin, I think, yeah, for DND, and GCG, kasi at that time, yung mga corporate, government corporations kasi, meron ding ano yan, meron ding mga confidential funds yan, no? That is provided in their own corporate operating budget. So we decided that we would review the whole thing and learn from each other, kasi iba-iba ang characterization, iba-iba yung paggamit, pangangailangan ng bawat ahensya, no? So we wanted to come up with something that was applicable across the board, across agencies, kumbaga, and where the barest minimum of documentary requirements at least would be there, no? Parang in
Right.
the spirit
Para pong,
clarity.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but para pong naging Biblia nung in the last 3 days, because laging yung
Yun ang
COA
sinasabi.
Joint Circular
2015.
2015 ang sinasite.
Yes.
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 Now,
Oo.
tell us the difference between confidential and intelligence funds, because when Senator Judge Lacson stood up, parang his knowledge kasi is intelligence funds. So he was even asking the witness, what is your security clearance? Linalagay yan sa vault. But are confidential funds treated with the same kind of scrutiny and care as intelligence funds?
Yeah, yes. Confidential funds, essentially, the essential difference is yung confidential funds sa mga civilian agencies.
Okay.
Yung intelligence sa military and uniformed personnel, what we call the intelligence practitioners. Actually, nakadefine yan sa Joint Circular. And that definition came from those who knew exactly what they were talking about. Now, let me just take this opportunity na I think in the last 2 days, parang nabugbog din yung notion na porke confidential funds, confidential din yung pagliliquidate o yung mga dokumento sa liquidation. No, that's not what it means. The term confidential has to do with the purpose of the fund. So, properly speaking, ang pinag-uusapan natin dito are funds for confidential uses or purposes. Ibig sabihin, ito yung mga PAPs, no? Projects, programs, and activities that are covert in nature because of the purpose that they seek to serve.
Okay.
Oo, pero yun ang confidential. Kaya lang, descriptive term, kinawang confidential funds. But really, what we are referring to are funds for confidential activities.
All right.
Yun.
How specific should they be? Because that was also a subject of a lot of interjections by the senators. the evidence, how successful was this covert operation, do you want them to be really specific? Kasi yung pinresent po ni Auditor Wamil, parang very general yung description.
Yes. Okay. In the joint circular, hindi talaga nakaspecify kung ano yon, no? But there must be a causal relationship between, I think that this was in the context of the informers, reward informers, no? Ano yung reward-rewardan mo? Ano yung, bakit mo reward-rewardan yan? At ano ang napalaan natin sa information na yan, no? So that link must be established. So kung hindi naman mahirap naman yung sasabihin mo, ginamit namin yan for informers reward. Okay, so what did we reward them for? No? At sino-sino to? I understand, I don't know, I could be wrong, no? But it looks like there are about 600 plus recipients of informers reward, something like that, no? At sa akin, red flag na kagad yun eh. Kasi
Bakit
kung
po?
confidential information ang binibili mo, no? Ibig sabihin, konti lang nakakaalam niyan. You have to pay or reward 600 people to be able to get information. Public knowledge na siguro yun sa dami na
Kumalat
nakakaalam.
na. Kumbaga.
Kalat yun. I mean, it's an information that you can probably gather from the streets. Not necessarily something, diba? So, yun. Isa. Pangalawa, kung informers reward, bakit paid in kind? Groceries, medicines, yun ang mga narinig ko kanina. Bakit
Red flag
ganun?
po rin yun?
Red flag yun. Medicines worth 70,000, yun ang reward ng whoever got it. Why? Diba? Kung ikaw ba mabibigyan ng reward, tatanggapin mo medicines worth 70, are you going to sell them in the black market or something? I mean, I'm just, says I don't know, okay?
Yeah.
I'm just
well, you have the experience. Ano pa bong red flag meron? Yung
bago
parang
ng mind eh.
Senator Pangilinan cited, walang butal. Hindi ba kung bibili ka ng gamot o grocery, hindi naman eksaktong 0-0. Red flag
Pero
din po ba yun? Yung very exact yung amounts?
Sa akin, not necessarily. Kasi, pag may mga ganyan, rina-round up na yan. I mean, okay lang yun. That's something trivial, okay? Pwedeng mag-round.
Okay.
Pero ang red flag sa akin doon is, kung namigay ka ng gamot at saka mga groceries by way of a reward, no? Ibig sabihin, binili mo yon, pre-procure mo yon. So,
Yes.
dapat meron ka receipt nun, no? Dapat may resibo ka nun. Pero parang wala. Well, according to Auditor Wamel,
Yes.
wala silang mga sinubmit na mga resibo na, pero merong gamot at merong mga groceries. At ang meron lang daw yung acknowledgement receipt
Right.
nung gap. Okay. So, akin mga red flags yon. Let me go a little farther. Pag sa audit, nakikita mo na yung mga gano'n na, teka, something does not compute here, no? As an auditor, you have all the right and in fact the duty to go deeper and investigate. Ano nangyayari dito? What's happening here? And you can ask for more documents maski hindi nakalagay sa joint circular. You can make inspections. You can call people, etc. There's so many ways of doing it. And people in ICFAO, the auditors in ICFAO, are not prevented from doing that, no? I don't know, during my time, I never told them to just limit themselves to the
Right.
documents.
But
Because yun yung sinasabi ni
that seemed to
ni-
be a flaw po eh. Parang they just limited it to documents. Hindi ba may inspection man lang to verify?
Oo. Kasi there was enough to go by, no? yun na nga, something doesn't compute, no? I mean, if we talk about regular, ordinary, daily experiences, parang it was really so out of the ordinary. Ito yung sinabi actually ni Senator Judge Villanueva kanina about skepticism. You know, we learn it from very basic, estudyante pa lang kami ng accounting. Pinag-aaralan na yan that one of the mindsets that an accountant should develop is skepticism. Yung what is said in a negative way, no? But don't take anything at face value.
Okay.
If there is something that sa pagdududa, imbestigahan mo, no? Parang kumbaga sa Tagalog, kailangan maging diskumpiyado ka ng konti.
Now,
Ganon.
Attorney, I'd like to ask you, did the COA give the OVP and the Education Secretary enough leeway to clear the issues that the COA raised?
I think so. I mean, based on the testimony, no? I'm just, of course, basing it on the testimony. They were given an AOM, eh. So, nakalagay lahat doon kung ano yung mga nakita ng mga audit deficiencies and how they wanted them to explain what other documents they wanted the agency to, ano.
Okay.
And then after that, hindi nila comply, nag-issue ng notice of suspension. That's another period. Eh, hanggang mating sa punto na wala na talaga silang natanggap, kaya nag-notice of dispense,
Okay.
I think. Yeah.
But what about that meeting where it was requested that just send us an audit query instead? Is there such a term really, audit query, instead of a memorandum?
An audit memorandum.
An AOM.
Audit observation memo, yeah.
Opo.
Yeah, there is such a thing as audit query, no? Pero sa pagkakaalam ko, ang pagkakaintindi ko ng audit query, it's the agency that asks a query from the COA. Usually, it has to do with some transactions, proposed transactions, that they are seeking guidance. How are we going to handle this? Paano i-account ito, etc., etc. That's usually the nature of audit query. Pero ito, parang yung ahensya, ang COA ang magbibigay ng audit query sa ahensya, parang hindi ko yun magets. Kasi kung meron mang gustong tanungin ng COA sa ahensya, nakalagay na yun sa AOM. Kaya nga pinapa-explain sila, eto mga tanong namin, eto mga namin, paki-explain, bakit ganito, bakit ganito. So, that's where the questions of the COA would be reflected.
Now, the notice of disallowance, according to Auditor Wamil, is already prima facie that shows that the head of the agency can be is already culpable. Tama po ba yun?
Person liable to return the money. Okay? Kasi at that point na after all the time given, no, the opportunities given for the agency to explain at hindi niya na-explain, kaya nga nag-issue na ng notice of disallowance, no? Hindi niya talaga na-liquidate. Hindi niya na-satisfy yung kailangang hinahanap na justification. So, presumed na hindi niya
na for personal use na. Yun na yung presumption.
There
Yun
is
na
a
yung presumption.
presumption. Yeah. Kasi hindi niya na explain.
Is that a betrayal of public trust?
I am not a senator, Judge.
But what do you, given your experience po?
I am so happy that I don't have to make that decision. Let's leave it at that. Okay?
Okay, it was asked by Senator Judge Amy Marcos, ang head of agency ba o yung special disbursement officer lang? Sino po ba ang mananagot dyan? How do you distinguish where the responsibility or accountability lies?
hindi ko masyadong makuha yung context ni Senator Judge Ivy kanina, no? But ang persons liable under, not only under the joint circular, but under all COA rules and regulations and the law, PD 1445, no? Ang persons liable, yung mga persons na may partisipasyon dun sa transaksyon. Halimbawa, yung nag-approve, yung gumawa ng check, kaya yung treasurer usually yung nag-issue, yung tumanggap, no? So lahat sila. And I think the testimony was to the effect that the VP was the one who approved. Because as a matter of fact, siya dapat ang nag-a-approve pag confidential fund, how it is to be utilized, no? Siya nag-a-approve talaga noon. So may participation siya. And that in itself already makes her one of the so-called persons liable. Also, in PD 1445, no, the head of agency, whether or not physical participation, by virtue of the fact na head of agency ka, nakalagay doon sa batas na primarily responsible ka na.
Was that...
Kasi may command responsibility.
Opo. When you were drafting that joint circular in 2015 and probably earlier, was this also a primary consideration? Kasi sabi nyo, it was all over the place, walang coherent guidelines na ultimately responsible dapat yung head of agency?
You know, in terms of the persons responsible, that has never been in question. Because we cannot detract from the law. The law is always there. Maski anong klaseng circular regulation ang gagawin ng COA, if it is not aligned with the law that says the head of agency is primarily responsible, invalid yung regulations o circulars na yan. So it was never an issue. Who the persons liable, wala kaming pinalitan dyan, sinunod lang ang batas.
We thank you once again for granting the big story, this very rare interview. We wish you the best. Former COA Chair Grace Pulido-Tan. Meantime, Vice President Sara Duterte was a visitor yesterday at the new Quezon City Jail in Payatas. In a statement, the BJMP confirmed Duterte dropping by the jail's male dormitory at 12 p.m. of August 4 and leaving about 3 hours later. Duterte met with Senators Rodante Marcoleta and Jinggoy Estrada and former Congressman Mike Defensor. All three are facing plunder charges but for different reasons. Marcoleta and Defensor in connection with 75 million pesos in undeclared campaign donations, and Estrada over the flood control scandal. In a Facebook post uploaded on his behalf, Defensor thanked the VP for the visit. He vowed to continue the fight against corruption and wished Duterte strength throughout her impeachment trial. This is still the big story on One News. A storm and the bad weather elsewhere cancel classes tomorrow. We have the full list of areas that have declared suspensions. Stay tuned. Tropical storm Maymay maintains its strength as it inches closer to Ilocos Sur. As of 8 p.m., the storm's eye was spotted west of Sinait, Ilocos Sur, packing winds of 75 kilometers per hour and gustiness of up to 90 kph. Wind signal number 2 is up over several areas in Ilocos, La Union, Apayao, Kalinga, and Mountain Province, Pangasinan, Benguet, and Cagayan. Signal number 1 is hoisted over the rest of the said provinces, as well as in parts of Ifugao, Isabela, Quirino, and Nueva Vizcaya, Zambales, Tarlac, and Nueva Ecija, Aurora, and Babuyan Islands. At the moment, Maymay is moving eastward at 10 kilometers per hour and could make landfall over Ilocos or La Union by tonight or early tomorrow morning. After that, it will weaken into a tropical depression, then into a low-pressure area by tomorrow afternoon or evening. Persistent rains have prompted several local government units to suspend classes tomorrow. Parts of Ilocos, Cordillera, Calabarzon, and Metro Manila have already canceled classes for August 6. The full list is being flashed on your screens right now. On a lighter note, Team Philippines has officially started preparations for the 2028 Los Angeles Olympics. Our big picture tonight, the Philippine Olympic Committee's first organizing meeting, led by POC President Bambol Tolentino and Chief of Mission Ricky Vargas. They were joined by Special Assistant to the Chief of Mission, Alfrancis Chua. Deputy Chefs of Mission, Attorney Wharton Chan, Abet Dungo, and Shena Olaso. Also in attendance were PBA Commissioner Willie Marshall, SBP Executive Director Erica D, MediaQuest Executive Risa Gilas, and PSC Executive Director Attorney Guillermo Iroy. The officials discussed long-term preparation plans as Team Philippines aims to match or even surpass its historic performance at the Paris Olympics. And before we go, tickets for Alex Ayala's National Bank Open Toronto debut sold out in just 30 minutes. Organizers of the WTA 1000 tournament report a late-stage surge of over 5,000 ticket requests from Toronto's huge Filipino community. This also forced a last-minute venue change to the 12,500-seat center court. The 21-year-old Filipina phenom enters the tournament fresh off capturing her maiden WTA singles title at the Mubadala DC Open, rocketing her to world number 20. Fans hope Ayala shifts into lockdown mode early as she faces American power hitter Alicia Parks tomorrow. That's 8:10 in the morning Philippine time. Ayala advised supporters to temper expectations.
It's not always going to be good days. There's definitely going to be bad days, but that's one thing I can be a professional in. I think my primary goal is to play good matches and at a good level. It's nice to see, that the Filipino community is really showing up.
And those are the big stories this rainy midweek. I'm Ces Orenia Drilon, kapatid. We are One News, your side, all the time. Keep safe and warm and dry. Good night.